Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. By now, you have probably heard of what happened at a church in Minneapolis, Minnesota last weekend. There was a planned protest, I guess you could call it, that took place on Sunday morning as the church was worshiping. The church congregants, I think, did a very good job of staying calm, though some were visibly shaken and traumatized. They prayed for the protesters that were in their face and shouting really loud. They read the Bible to them and took the opportunity to really evangelize them while they're there in church, right? Well, from a series of articles from the Daily Wire comes this. President Donald Trump said Tuesday that the anti-ICE activists who stormed the Minnesota church on Sunday were professional troublemakers who should be incarcerated or thrown out of the country. Now, Trump's comments come as his Justice Department has pledged to bring charges against the leftists who entered City's Church in St. Paul and recited chants like, justice for Renee Good and hands up, don't shoot, and ICE out of Minnesota. Former CNN host Don Lemon live streamed the protest under the guise of being an independent journalist. Quote, just watch footage of the church raid in Minnesota by the agitators and insurrectionists. These people are professionals. No person acts the way they act. They are highly trained to scream, rant, and rave like lunatics in a certain manner, just like they are doing. They are troublemakers who should be thrown in jail or thrown out of the country. This is what Trump wrote on Truth Social early Tuesday morning. Now, the protest was organized and promoted by a racial justice network and Black Lives Matter Twin Cities. You can see the pamphlets and things like that went up and were distributed ahead of time. Now, City's Church was targeted because one of its pastors works for ICE. William Kelly, a prominent professional protester who has demonstrated outside the Church of War Secretary Pete Hegseth in Washington, D.C., was among those who entered the sanctuary during Sunday morning service. We're going to talk a little more about him later. Now, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights Harmeet Dillon said Monday that charges for those involved in the protest are forthcoming. She also suggested that Lemon could face charges if he knowingly participated in a conspiracy against civil rights, which actually he did. We're going to talk again a little bit more about him later as well. I mean, he's giving ahead of time, he's giving the protest organizer a kiss and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, quote, I see various crimes that have occurred, she told conservative podcaster Benny Johnson on Monday. Quote, exactly what they are, I'm not going to flag, but the FACE Act has been mentioned as one of the predicates there. In other cases, the Biden DOJ used the Klan Act conspiracy charges tacked onto the FACE Act in the case of protests outside abortion clinics to bring much larger sentences. The FACE Act protects the rights of those attending worship services to be free from disruption. So, yeah, the United States Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, said that she's working closely with Attorney General Pam Bondi to investigate for federal offenses, including breaking the FACE Act, that's the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, which Dillon noted criminalizes blocking, interfering with, or disrupting a house of worship. Quote, that's exactly what these people did, clearly. So the only question really is who they are and what other offenses there may be. She said later, we don't prejudge a situation, but we'd like to make the strongest case possible. This is what she said during that interview, which I'm going to play a little bit for you here in just a minute. Quote, I find that the silence of the Attorney General of Minnesota, the District Attorney Mary Moriarty of Hennepin County, and the Governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, shocking. We're going to talk about them here in a second as well. They're the governor, district attorney, and attorney general of these people too. And where's the reassurance to them? Governor Tim Walz's office told Fox News the governor has repeatedly and unequivocally urged protesters to do so peacefully while people have a right to speak out. He in no way supports interrupting a place of worship. Okay, you can talk out of both sides of the mouth if he wants, but anyway, Dillon also emphasized the churchgoers who may be concerned about protests when attending a service in the coming weeks. She says, I feel like I have to give a First Amendment 101 primer to people, including journalists like Don Lemon, because you don't have a First Amendment right to trespass and invade a house of worship. It's literally illegal to do that, and it's not protected by the First Amendment. On top of that, she said, and she's talking about the former CNN, the one who got fired by the way, by CNN. He was so bad. He was a CNN anchor, Don Lemon, and he live streamed the protests inside the church. And Dillon suggested in other interviews on Monday that it would potentially open the door for charges against the liberal commentator, saying, and so you can have your protest a safe distance away from a private facility. You can have your protest in a park. You can have a march. You can get a permit for a large gathering, but you can't just go wherever you want and tear things up and disrupt. And that's what these people did. And so now people are afraid to go to church. And that is an absolute disgrace in our country. This is what she continued to say. She also recommended that houses of worship have cameras outside their buildings to, quote, be prepared to record what's going on and who's coming. She said, I would tell people that they should not be on edge. We believe in the Almighty, and this DOJ has the right and the ability to step in and protect where the local authorities won't. We're going to talk about that here in a second. Anti-ICE protests escalated in Minnesota after an ICE agent, of course, was fatally shot Renee Good, who was a woman who was allegedly attempting to hit the officer with her vehicle. Not really much allegedly, because he actually received, injuries, internal bleeding, and things like that within his pelvic region. But anyway, going to Don Lemon, Dillon also said that the former CNN host Don Lemon is on her target list to face federal charges for his involvement in the anti-ICE protests that targeted the church service on Sunday. She said multiple crimes were committed during the protest and warned that those involved would be facing lengthy prison sentences. She also suggested that former CNN host Don Lemon would face charges for his involvement. While Dillon did not specify the charges that would be brought, she pointed to possible violations of the FACE Act and the Ku Klux Klan Act, which we just referenced here a little bit ago. She says, I see various crimes that have occurred, and is what she told Benny Johnson and on his podcast on Monday, saying exactly what they are, I'm not going to flag, but the FACE Act has been mentioned as one of the predicates there. In other cases, the Biden DOJ used the Klan Act's conspiracy charges tacking onto the FACE Act in the case of protests outside abortion clinics to bring much longer sentences. She also suggested that Lemon, who was embedded with the protesters under the guise of an independent journalist, would face criminal charges for his role, saying that Don Lemon himself has come out and said he knew exactly what was going to happen inside the facility. I mean, he didn't just show up because he was walking down the street, right? He went into the facility and then he began committing journalism, as he put it, as if that's sort of a shield from being a part of an embedded part of criminal conspiracy. It isn't, she said. So I want to play you that clip that she talks about with Benny here on his podcast.
We will pursue charges in this case. I see various crimes that have occurred. Exactly what they are, I'm not going to flag, but the FACE Act has been mentioned as one of the predicates there. In other cases, the Biden DOJ used the Klan Act conspiracy charges tacked on to the FACE Act in the case of protests outside abortion clinics to bring much longer sentences. So there are a number of tools available to us. Who funded this? What else? What other crimes may have occurred? Was there a use of the wires or the mails in preparing for this event? Did anyone cross state lines to do this? All of those are potential predicates for additional federal charges.
I mean, I've just pulled up the Klan Act because this is the first time that I've heard this mentioned. This is a act that was passed in 1871, correction there, to combat the Ku Klux Klan and protect African Americans' voting rights, especially the Enforcement Act, which is known as the Force Act. So here's some of the information on screen. Would you mind breaking down for us, because we have just read the FACE Act and how this is an affinity to the FACE Act, an obvious and egregious demonstrable violation of the FACE Act, because they were entering a place of worship, harassing and threatening. We just played a video of a man, a bearded man, who was threatening to attack the Christians that were worshiping there. So it seems like an obvious FACE Act violation. But the Klan Act here, it is on screen. First time I've heard it mentioned. Can you unpack this for us, Harmeet?
Yeah, the Klan Act is one of the most important federal civil rights statutes, and it goes back to the time when President Lincoln emancipated the slaves, and yet the southern states, Dixiecrats mainly, were refusing to give them equal rights. And in fact, that you had sheriffs and you had law enforcement harassing the newly freed slaves. So the Klan Act is a law that makes it illegal to terrorize citizens, to violate their civil rights, to get together and conspire to violate the civil rights. It is often used against law enforcement, but is now used against others as well. So whenever anyone conspires to violate the protected civil rights of American citizens, the Klan Act can be used to bring a conspiracy charge. We, in the federal law enforcement parlance, call this 241 and 242. Civil and criminal conspiracies. And so what the Biden administration did is, if three grandmas got together to pray outside an abortion clinic for the souls of the people inside, and including the unborn children, they would say, oh, that's not just a violation of the Klan Act, that's a conspiracy to violate the civil rights of women going in there to get abortions. And so we're going to add additional charges and punish that more and make it from a misdemeanor under the FACE Act to a felony under the Klan Act. And President Trump pardoned the pro-life protesters in those cases. I have recently defended successfully in the 11th Circuit a case called Oropesa, a case of Jane's Revenge, the pro-abortion protesters violently attacking crisis pregnancy centers in Florida. And we had the court uphold the Klan Act criminal enhancement to the FACE Act. So I know this is very deep in the weeds, but the point is, there are a number of things. The FACE Act is just the start. Like I said, you have material support for disruptive activities. You have conspiracy to violate civil rights. You have potentially the use of other instrumentalities to commit crimes. And so some of these folks who did this have self-identified. Don Lemon himself has come out and said he knew exactly what was going to happen inside that facility. He went into the facility, and then he began, quote unquote, committing journalism. And as if that's sort of a shield from being an embedded part of a criminal conspiracy. It isn't. And so, we're getting our ducks in a row. We're putting the facts together. And this is a very serious matter. Come next Sunday, nobody should think in the United States that they're going to be able to get away with this. Everyone in the protest community needs to know that the fullest force of the federal government is going to come down and prevent this from happening and put people away for a long, long time.
So what she's saying here is that both the statutes were previously used by the Biden administration to go after peaceful pro-life protesters who demonstrated outside abortion facilities. While the FACE Act guarantees entry to abortion facilities, it can also be used to bring charges against those who intentionally interfere with people attempting to exercise their religious liberty at a place of worship. Now, the KKK Act makes it a crime to conspire to suppress a person's civil rights and can be punished with more than a decade in prison and hefty fines. So you heard what she had to say there, and they're going to try to use both of those to put away these people for a long time and escalate this up to a felony. Now, the church was targeted because one of the pastors on the staff reportedly works for a local ice field office. Protesters entered the sanctuary screaming at the worshipers and disrupting the service and doing all kinds of just, terrible things. And I'm going to play you a clip of one of the guys that did this and his own video that he taped himself doing this. A professional protester known for harassing worshipers at Secretary of War Pete Hegseth Church in Washington, D.C., has emerged as a key figure in the disruption of Sunday services in the city's church in St. Paul, Minnesota. His name is William Kelly, a self-described combat veteran. Was captured on video storming into the sanctuary with a mob of other activists associated with the Black Lives Matter and the Racial Justice Network. Now, the demonstrators chanted, hands up, don't shoot, which, by the way, the hands up, don't shoot thing was a total farce. That never happened. So the fact that they can't come up with a slogan that actually happened is self-telling. But anyway, they also screamed at congregants, labeling them as fake Christians because one of the church pastors also serves as an ICE field director. Jonathan Parnell, the lead pastor of the Southern Baptist Church, called the protesters shameful and eventually chose to end the service after some of the children started crying. Kevin Ezell, head of the Southern Baptist Mission Board, said on X that he had spoken with city's church staff members who reported that the kids in the worship service were terrified. In a later post, he added that these intimidating tactics are not only illegal, but cowardly. No cause justifies traumatizing families as they worship and desecrate a sacred place. Well, many on social media, including Deputy Undersecretary of War Justin Overbaugh, immediately identified Kelly as the same man regularly posting outside Hegseth Church in Washington, and Joe Rigney, a founding pastor of City's Church in St. Paul, who also helped plant Christ Church in D.C., said Kelly and his fellow protesters have regularly disrupted the D.C. worship service for the past 6 months. Yeah, the past 6 months. Quote, they'll play music or yell and scream and use bullhorns and loud sound amplification to try to prevent us from singing psalms and hearing the word preached, is what he told the Daily Wire. One member was transported to the hospital after a protester screaming into a bullhorn shattered his eardrum. Yeah. Rigney and Kelly's tactics have also included screaming obscenities at minors as families are entering the sanctuary, forcing a need for the police escorts. Quote, they've sought to disrupt Christian worship gatherings now in multiple places. Kelly and his fellow activists are allegedly protesting an ICE agent fatality shooting in the Rene Good during a raid in Minneapolis earlier the month. But Rigney, who pastored city's church and lived in Minneapolis for 7 years before he joined Christ Church, notes that he has no connection to Kelly's reasons for harassing his new congregation, which Kelly has targeted for being Christian nationalists, is what he likes to say. Rigney believes that the cause isn't important to Kelly or his compatriots, who he accuses of being part of a network of paid activists who wait for an opportunity opening to wreak havoc and chaos and all that kind of stuff. He says, I think Minneapolis, because of the George Floyd riots, the Black Lives Matter organizations were already sort of there, but had just kind of been latent and inactive, is what Rigney said. He says, and now there's a new thing that has kind of triggered them. So I think that the same groups that were agitating about that then have found a kind of new cause of the movement to allow them to protest. Rigney says he hopes the Trump administration will prosecute everyone involved in disrupting these church services to send a message that it's unacceptable. And the Department of Justice has already announced that it is investigating the protests for violations of federal rights laws under the FACE Act and others. Local Minneapolis law enforcement does not look like likely that it's going to act. In fact, we're going to cover some stuff here in a second on that. The police department monitored the service, but made no immediate arrests as demonstrators left the building after the service had been stopped. Police officials said they were working to balance respect for both free speech and the right of congregations to worship without disruption. I don't know how they were trying to do that, because obviously there was total disruption. But asked how he responds to charges from Kelly and the other protesters that it is not Christian to support ICE and ICE's work, Rigney, who published a 2025 book on the misuse of empathy, said he doubts that they have much understanding of Christianity. I would agree with that. He said, I think that kind of rhetoric is an attempt to steer. And he said that particularly coming from people who likely aren't Christians, or at least aren't biblical believing Christians, it is an attempt to steer and sabotage Christians so that they won't resist the lawlessness that the left is seeking to impose. Rigney believes that the Christian response to such attacks is greater boldness. In the book of Acts, he says, you saw precisely this kind of lawlessness, he said. You had mobs, you had shouting false accusations, you had government officials encouraging it in the way that the Democrats are doing right now. And in that day, Christians gathered together and they prayed for boldness. I thought that was really good of him. I thought his insight into that was excellent. And he said that's what Christians ought to meet this with. In fact, I want to play for you a clip of Kelly here, and again, this is his own video. Okay, he's taking his video, and I know you can't see it, but basically all you have to do is hear it. And so let me play for you that video now.
As you can see, all these pretend Christians, all these comfortable white people who are living lavish, comfortable lives while children are dragged into concentration camps. You're living real life, nice lives with your lattes, doing absolutely nothing for your Latino and Somali brothers and sisters. You come here to a man wearing a suit is a preacher?
Yeah. And he goes on and on with this. I mean, this is ridiculous. He's literally going up and down the aisles like this. He is in the face of people. He is again.
Why do I not
it just goes on. I could play another minute worth of this stuff, and you get the idea, right? And so this brings up kind of a question, right? What should churches be doing in order to prepare for this type of thing? Because I think I think the insight that Rigney had when he talks about this is like from the book of Acts. He said, you saw precisely this kind of lawlessness, he said. You had mobs, which is what you have here. You had shouting false accusations, which is what you have here. You had government officials encouraging it in a way that the Democrats are doing right now. And so what should we be doing as Christians? What should we be doing as pastors? What should we be doing as churches today because of what we see currently? And I came across this from Keith Graves of ChristianWarriorTraining.com, and he says, this incident highlights several realities churches can no longer ignore. First, churches are no longer viewed as neutral spaces by activists. In moments of social tension, churches are increasingly treated as platforms, symbols, or leverage points. Second, accusations often move faster than verifications. I like that. Accusations often move faster than verifications. By the time facts are sorted out, damage to safety, trust, and worship has already occurred. Third, disruptions do not have to turn violent to be harmful. A loud, aggressive intrusion during worship can cause panic, trauma, and long-term fear among congregants, especially children and seniors. In fact, we saw that in this. We saw children, huddled and crying because of what was happening here. And finally, federal investigations after the fact do not prevent the initial disruption. Preparedness does. Okay, so it's kind of like closing the barn door after the horse has gotten out, right? You have to be prepared for this type of thing in order to prevent this kind of thing. So again, what the question then arises: what should churches do now in order to prevent this kind of thing from happening at their church? Well, he says this is not a call for fear or bunker mentality. It is a call for awareness and planning. Churches should take the following steps seriously. And this is what he gives a few of them here. He says, number one, plan for protest-style disruptions, not just violent threats. Okay, so all churches should have a security team. They should have they should have prepared for disruptions, not just violent threats. Many security plans focus heavily on active shooters, while ignoring organized nonviolent intrusions. Teams need protocols for disruptive groups that refuse to leave but are not immediately violent. Okay. Number two, train greeters and security teams on early intervention. The first line of defense is often the front door. So teams should be trained to recognize group entry, coordinated behavior, and early verbal escalation before it reaches the sanctuary. So again, keeping these kinds of people outside the building is a big part of defusing the situation. Number three, establish clear authority and responsive roles. So who makes the call to ask someone to leave? Who contacts law enforcement? Who communicates with staff and the congregation? Those decisions should not be made on the fly. These are all things that should be that should be coordinated ahead of time. Coordinate, this is number four, coordinate with local law enforcement ahead of time. So churches that already have a relationship with local police can get faster, more appropriate responses during the disruptions. So, saying, hey, here's who I'm going to call, here's how it's going to be responded to, and have that already set up. Number five, control internal communications during an incident. So, panic spreads faster than facts, as we've already established. Churches should have a plan for calm, clear instructions to congregants if a disruption occurs. And so that way people can stay calm and do the right thing when it's actually happening. Number six, and finally, avoid reacting publicly before facts are verified. Social media pressure will be intense if this happens at your church. Churches should slow down, verify information, and communicate carefully to avoid amplifying false claims. So, like I say, lastly, let me sum this up here. And bring to you here a couple of things that have transpired here just recently. If Minnesota churchgoers expected local prosecutors to protect them after anti-ICE disruptors halted the worship service on Sunday, they might want to think again. A top staffer for the Hennepin County's Soros-backed prosecutor, he's a Soros-backed prosecutor. He's the one that gave him the money to get elected. He was among the protesters. Yeah, that's right. Jamal Lundy works as an intergovernmental affairs coordinator for the Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty and is married to St. Paul City Council member Anika Bowie and is running for a seat in the state legislature as a Democrat, according to his campaign website. The Department of Justice is pursuing the federal charges against these protesters who disrupted the church services. And so he looks like is one of those that they're going to go after. Also, Minnesota Transgender State Representative Leah Fink calls on anti-ICE activists to storm more churches now. So again, government officials calling out the protesters to do more of this. Quote, actions like this is what he says. Actions like this, nonviolent resistance in the face of government inaction or oppression are essential, he says. And they must continue until ICE is out of our state. The administration is out of the White House, and dignity and humanity for all of our neighbors is achieved. So again, what he's calling for, more of this type of thing. All right, so lastly, and all of that I just went over, that's why the FBI doled out federal criminal investigation subpoenas yesterday to the offices of Governor Tim Walz, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, and Attorney General Keith Ellison for allegedly conspiring to interfere with immigration and customs enforcement actions in the state. 6 offices were subpoenaed in total so far. More probably on the way. But Fox News' Bill Milligan reported that sources also told the outlet that the FBI served the subpoenas seeking records and communication. So looks like it's already on its way. Looks like there's things that are happening, and that's very good. But it's only happening at the federal level because everything local on the ground there is there's not going to be any kind of justice served whatsoever. And in fact, they're doing just the opposite. So anyway, would love to hear what you think on this. Maybe you have a different perspective. I would love to hear from you. And of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening.
This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.